have a question or comment, please use the raise hand function to ensure everyone has an opportunity to speak. With that, I'll call for a motion and second for approval of the minutes of the regular commission meeting of January 12th, 2022.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. If Pam, if you could lead us through the vote, please.
Commissioners Alexander,
Aye.
Kupro-Comas,
Aye.
Lamb,
Aye.
Levy,
Aye.
McDonald, Nemi, O'Halloran,
Aye.
Semput,
Aye.
and Strader. Thank you.
Thank you. Curtis, I'll turn it over to you for the executive director's report, please.
Great. Thank you, Madam President. Good morning, commissioners. Nice to see most of you. Hope everyone's holding up. And I know it's been a pretty wild beginning of 2022. We were just, Commissioner Lamb and I were just talking about family members having COVID, and I hope everyone's doing okay. Let me today start with a safety moment. I think if you would, we've got some safety champions I'd like to recognize who, here you go, for port employees who have really gone above and beyond to make sure our workplace is safe. We just have a lot going on right now. I think, as everybody knows, we've got people working at home and people working on site in strange conditions. We've got over 500 contractors on site working at PDX Next, and Debbie and Amanda and Tanya and Philip have all really stepped up and shown leadership in the safety space. So thanks to all four of you for your time and energy and focus on safety. Stan, would you take the time this morning and give us a safety moment?
Sure. My message today is about the Port's second Caterpillar Safety Perception Survey results, which were shared out during a leadership report out on January 27th. You may recall our first effort to assess our safety culture through a safety perception survey was back in May of 2018. And in this past October, 83% of Port employees of all levels completed our second safety perception survey to better understand our current state safety culture, the perceived strengths, and identify opportunity areas. The survey explored 21 statistically validated safety culture indicators, and those indicators are all on your screen right now. Results are complete, and we want to thank all the employees who actively participated by taking the survey and making themselves available for virtual cultural interview sessions. If we could put the next slide up. Thank you. On the screen, you can see the 2021 Safety Perception Survey score reflects an overall Port enterprise perception improvement of 4.2%. Our Caterpillar safety consultant revealed that 4.2% is a substantial positive move. Business line results are also indicated with growth indicators for the new 2021 data. Most business lines improved on their 2018 score, and a couple, Marine and Police, substantially improved. Fire sustained their 2018 score at a 76.4% positive rate, and PDX Maintenance slid 2.2 points to 71.7. We are now actively engaging with work groups to thank employees, communicate the results, and disseminate the report data. The Port businesses will distill the data to reveal gaps in performance and deliver our strengths as we action plan for continuous improvement. Combined with our ongoing safety and health efforts, the Safety Perception Survey action plans will continue to support and foster the Port's guiding principle of safety. Curtis, that's my message today.
Terrific. Thanks, Dan. Really great numbers at Marine and Police in particular. I was really struck in the report out how important it was to identify the areas where management and line don't agree, where their assessments differ. And that was super informative, gave us some real specific direction on how to get at better understanding for managers of what's going on for people on the front line, and better exchange of information. So thanks for that, really helpful. Let me start with a little bit about PDX. On January 26th, we held the grand opening for our new sensory room on Concourse D. And I've got to say, I didn't know what a sensory room was before this work started. It's a space that's geared towards visitors with cognitive or sensory processing challenges, and it features a mobile sensory station and comfortable seating options and tactile art and a really calming, comfortable atmosphere. It's been a real hit with travelers, and we're really happy to make the airport more accessible to our community. I do want to thank the port employees who really put time and energy into this, from engineering and construction to maintenance, the electricians involved. It's just been a really great move for the port, and really hopeful for the future about engaging with more of our community. Portland Winter Light Festival. So on the Community Connections side, we're really proud to participate in the 7th year of the Portland Winter Light Festival, which is an annual event of the Willamette Light Brigade, which is a nonprofit arts organization here in town. As you know, or may have seen, we added vertical programmable lights on the outside of Concourse E when it was completed about a year ago. We invented a light artist, Stephen Harper, with Indigo Design to create a light installation for PDX. It looks really cool. We've got some great photos on the website. You can find roses and forest and PDX carpet in the light art. Really exciting and fun stuff. PDX Next, we've been talking about a lot. I know I was out, late last week visiting crews on site. We've got over 500 contractors on site. Structural demo of the Clock Tower Plaza begins next month. The slab is now in place. The teams have been working really well out there, and happily also very safely. Inside the airport, it's going to get a little loud in the next month or so as we bring the new main terminal designs to life. The big step that I was made aware of last week is really the separation of the old floor from the existing ticket lobby. And that's going to be a big saw cutting through. It's going to take a number of days. We're really working to make sure our employees and travelers understand that the short-term interruptions will be worth it for the long-term improvements. On the marine side, I want to acknowledge a letter that we received from Leal Sunda and the leadership of ILWU Local 8 regarding our decision to move forward with the EDA grant, the Economic Development Association grant, or administration grant at T2 for a mass timber manufacturing and workforce training center. It's a really exciting project. The concerns expressed by Leal Sunda in the letter were thoughtful, and we are going to stay the course regarding mass timber at T2, but really want to note that we really value the relationship with ILWU and feel good about the alignment that we have around growing our general cargo capabilities at T6. It remains our highest marine investment priority, and you'll hear more about that from me and from the team in the months ahead. With that, Madam President, I conclude my remarks this morning. Thanks for the time.
Thank you, Curtis. Any questions or comments on the Executive Director's report? Commissioner Nemi?
Hi, thank you, Madam President. I did read the letter we received from ILWU and would like to better understand, from your perspective or the port management's perspective about the viability of bringing cargo back to that terminal. So I am interested in learning more about that.
Great. Well, why don't I just give you a couple sentences here, Commissioner, and then we'd be happy to come back to Commission and talk more about the possibilities. We have not had general cargo deliveries at T2 for, I want to say, 4 years. Essentially, it's further up the Willamette. It's faced with narrower, shallower river depths. And so we're seeking really to grow that general cargo, the break bulk side of the business, out at T6. That likely is going to include some requirements for investment in new cranes and essentially adding supports to the terminal out there. But because we can do that out at out at T6, it essentially has made T2 no longer a big part of the general cargo business. It historically, for 100 years, was mostly raw log exports and break bulk of various types. And it just is no longer required to do the kind of business that we're interested in doing. That includes things like wind turbine parts. I think just a year or so ago, we got wind tower parts out at T6. We're able to do that work. It likely, if we want to grow that business, will require some more investment, but we think T6 is the place to do that with great rail connections and highway connections and additional space to use. So we'll bring you some more detail on that and get you up to speed on how we're thinking about the investment future. But I'll just note, the partnership with ILW has been great. They've really been humming out at T6, especially on the container business. And I think that's where we're going to see the real opportunity to grow in the future.
Thank you. And thank you, Curtis, for the offer to bring more information to the commission. Wasn't sure if I saw someone else wanted to speak. So we'll just pause a moment. Okay, seeing none, I will call for motion and second for approval of the executive director's report.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All right, Pam, would you lead us through the vote, please?
Commissioners Alexander,
Aye.
Kupro-Comas,
Aye.
Lamb,
Aye.
Levy,
Aye.
McDonald,
Aye.
Nemi,
Aye.
O'Halloran,
Aye.
Sumput,
Aye.
and Strader.
Thank you,
Commissioner
Pam.
Strader, are you on mute?
It appears frozen in my view.
Yeah, it looks like he's leaving. Maybe he'll come back in.
Yep, okay.
Thank you. Did we have enough votes for approval?
Yes, we did.
Thank you. Moving on to the public comment section of our meeting. No public comments were received this month. So we will move on to the general discussion item. And Bobby Stedman will introduce the general discussion item, Small Business Annual Report. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President, and good morning, Commissioners. As you all know, our small businesses are a vital contributor to the economic vitality of our region. The Port Small Business Development Program was developed to ensure that small businesses are provided an equal opportunity to compete for and perform on port contracts, and to provide small businesses with the technical assistance needed to grow and improve their businesses. As recipients of funding from FAA, the Port also has an obligation to set goals and track participation for projects and concessions at all three of the Port's operating airports. These goals are set and participation is tracked and reported to each year. The Port has made the conscious choice to also set small business goals on non-federally funded contracts, as we believe this work is vital to improving the shared prosperity within the region. This year, we're super excited to share with you the significant progress that has been made in the utilization of small businesses on port projects. In addition, for the first time, we're going to also report on the diversity of the workforce that perform work under these contracts. So I would like to introduce you to Kimberly Sutton. Kimberly is the Port's Small Business Development Program Manager, and she's here this morning to provide an overview of the various small business programs, as well as an update on accomplishments to date and our future program initiatives. So with that, Kimberly, I'm going to pass it on to you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for having me. I am Kimberly Sutton, the Small Business Development Program Manager for the Port of Portland, and I'm going to update you on how we did for the last federal fiscal year. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the purpose of the Port Small Business Development Program is to enhance opportunities to small businesses in the region through by ensuring non-discrimination in contracting, leveling the playing field for small businesses and port opportunities, running with scissors by removing barriers to participation and assisting in the development of firms to successfully compete in the marketplace. It's a broad approach, but we believe that this driving mission of focus really helps us create policies and programs within the Small Business Development Department that creates opportunities for those disadvantaged and small businesses in our community. Next slide, please. The Port Small Business Development Program has 5 unique programs that are designed to complement each other to develop small businesses and provide a gateway to port business opportunities. I'm just going to go through each of them, but we will go into more detail for each of them in later slides. So this, but we have our Small Business Enterprise Program we refer to as our SBE program. This is a program that we use our port-funded dollars on. It's inclusive of all certified firms in Oregon and Washington that are certified. Typical certifications include minority-owned, women-owned, service-disabled, veteran-owned, and emerging small businesses. Bulk of what we contract with falls into the SBE category. And then we have our federal program, our Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program, or DBE. This program applies to all federally funded, grant-funded airport improvement projects, such as runway improvements. This program is required by the FAA as a recipient of those grant dollars to administer the program and in adherence to federal regulations. And then we have our complementary program, Airports Concessions Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program, ACDBE. That's a mouthful. That program is similar to the DBE program, is also a requirement of the FAA and applies to all concessions-related activity, such as food and beverage, retail, and car rental opportunities inside of our airport. And then we have our Mentor Protege program, which is MPP, which is the port's nationally recognized small business technical assistance program. The Mentor Protege program provides education, coaching, development to small businesses to support the port in meeting our overall contracting goal, as well as supporting the development of small businesses in the region to compete regionally in and outside of the port's marketplace. And then finally, we have our Workforce Training and Hiring program. This provides on-the-job training opportunities for registered apprentices on port projects. The intent of the program is to increase the number of women and minorities in the construction trades through apprenticeship opportunities on port projects. And eventually, when folks are successful going through the program, those are also the ones that in the future open up small businesses. So we're feeding that future pipeline of small and minority business owners at some point. Again, additional details will follow on the upcoming slides. Next slide, please. So we're going to start with our SBE program. This program, although is not a legal requirement, the port believes very strongly that equity in contracting is core to our values, and as such, we have established the SBE program to ensure that small and disadvantaged businesses in our region have equal access to port contracting opportunities. We use the SBE program to do a broad reach of those within our community to create opportunity every time the port spends money. And SBE is, again, is any small business that is certified by Oregon or Washington. And what we do is we examine every contract over $500,000, and using our disparity study availability findings, we establish small business participation goals for each project. The lowest bidder must meet the small business participation goal or provide every documentation that they made good faith efforts to do so. If they're unable to do that, we will reject the bid and go to the next bidder. Professional services contracts are a little bit different. We solicit those through a request for proposal process in which we require the proposer to tell us, what are you going to do on this contract, and give us a subcontracting plan that makes sense. And then that becomes a contractual obligation that we monitor through regular compliance meetings. All firms awarded contracts under the SB program are required to meet with the Small Business Development Department staff. They have to finalize a subcontracting plan right before they begin work that is approved by our team. And then we regularly monitor adherence to meeting those goals through compliance monitoring meetings. We also are able to provide additional support to the vendor if the problems arise throughout the life of the project that could jeopardize them meeting the goal, and the compliance monitoring meetings help us address those issues before they get there. So how did we do? So for last year, the board awarded 13 contracts, and that was in the formal threshold of 500,000 or more. 33.5 million was the value of those contracts, and 4 of them went directly to small businesses as primes. That was for our prime awards. We had $6.6 million directly in the hands of small businesses. Those 13 prime contracts resulted in 62 subcontracts, and an additional 9 million was subcontracted, and 9.3 million of that went to small businesses. So what we're seeing is that more contracts are landing in the hands of certified small businesses, yet we're still subcontracting a bulk of the work over to small businesses when possible. So I was really happy to see these numbers because it reflects the hard work that our team is doing, working with our vendors to ensure that the plan that they submit at the time of bid are being actualized. So that resulted in overall achievement of a whopping 38%. This is a pretty high achievement, especially in light of the pandemic and everything that's been going on. I do want to just point out, though, that we believe that, that a bulk of this, a piece of this can be attributed to the Terminal Core project, which is a huge project, and we're doing phenomenal outreach, including small businesses on that. So I just want to point that out, that there might be a little bit of a sway there. So if and when the project's over, it goes down a bit, we'll know why. But we're doing great right now, and I'm going to just enjoy the 38%. I love those numbers. Next slide, please. So here's a snapshot of how we've done for the last 5 years. We have a history of exceeding the port's 20% goal. The 20% goal was driven from our 2018 disparity study, which identified if the port, based on what the port typically purchases and the availability in the marketplace, 20% of our dollars could easily go to small businesses. Well, we're knocking that out the park. So now that we have enough historical data, we're able to use this data to take a look at what our overall goal is and examine it. So for next year, we're going to be we have enough data to reasonably and defensively raise our port's overall goal from 20 to 25%. This is huge because now we can get even more aggressive, and we're able to say, hey, 20% is in the marketplace. We're going to go to 25 because that's what the data gives us. And if we continue to trend upwards, we might be able to even push that a little bit further down the line. But everything's data driven for now, so we have to make sure that we're operating within the bounds of the rules. But I'm really proud of the port because this takes a village to consistently beat our overall benchmarking for the marketplace. It means that it's not just the small business department that's working on this. That means all the departments are contributing and making sure that when they're administering these contracts, that they're keeping the small business program in mind. So these numbers have a bigger story in my opinion. Next slide, please. All right, the Federal Disadvantaged Business Program. The Ports DB program is comprised of minority and women-owned small businesses that are certified as DBE by the state of Oregon or Washington. Again, we have this program in place as a requirement of the FAA for all of our federally funded projects that the FAA gives us funds for. It's primarily used for runway improvement projects. Goals are set utilizing US DOT goal setting regulations and methodology, which requires the port to review each anticipated FAA contract for the next 3 years and determine how many DBEs are available for the type of work that will be contracted, and compares this to the overall availability of all firms to perform work on the project. We are required to use this data from our disparity study when determining the availability of DBE firms to perform work at the port. The analysis provides the port with a 3-year goal and is required to be updated whenever new FAA grants are awarded to the port. The port must establish 3 separate DBE goals for each of our operating airports. It's a lift. It's not an easy thing to do. Additionally, the port must adhere to the strict requirements in the contracting processes used for the selection of the contractors, which can make it challenging to obtain DBE participation. They tend to have rules that say, bring us DBE participation, but don't do these actions. And those actions are actually what brings participation. So we have to get pretty creative on how to get folks through the door. And I think we've got it down after all these years. The port utilizes a combination of outreach, contractor education, technical services to continually improve the use of DBEs on port projects. So I'm going to break down how we did for each of our 3 airports. As you can see, PDX was knocked out the park here. We had a goal of 11%, and we ended up achieving 64%, which is phenomenal. The reason for that is because 2 contracts were awarded under the DBE program, and this resulted in Catworks Construction, who is a Hispanic-owned DBE Oregon contractor, being awarded one of the DBE prime contracts. And so that was a huge win for us, and it just, we were able to knock this goal out the park. And then our Hillsborough Airport had 1 contract awarded under the DBE program. This project initially had a 15% goal. Wildish partnered with CorePac, which is an Asian Pacific woman-owned company in Oregon, and they subcontracted out 42% of the work to that subcontractor, which is a great story to tell. It's the first time working out at PDX, or excuse me, at the Port of Portland, at the Hillsborough Airport. So they broke their teeth, so to speak, out on one of our bigger projects, got the experience, and now there's 2 other contracts in the pipeline. So we're starting to see how these programs create opportunity after opportunity. And so we achieved 42% at Hillsborough. And finally, Troutdale had no contracts, no awards, no goals. So it's sitting at a 0 right now. We anticipate the Troutdale Airport has a grant coming down in FY24. So in FY23, we'll start goal setting and doing the outreach associated with the Troutdale Airport. But at this time, there's no data to report. Next slide, please. As you can see, here's the historical trend of how we've done. And this is all airports combined, so this isn't broken down, but this is just a historical snapshot. As you can tell, we tend to hover around the 10% range for the last 5 years. And that's about in line with what the DBE availability is in our region for the type of work the port typically does, which is airport runway improvement. That's in line. So, but this year, as you can see, we had this big spike in FY21 due to the one prime contract going directly into the hands of a DBE firm, and then almost 50% of the work for another contract going into the hands of a DBE firm. So we're really starting to see this trend. I'm hoping, although I don't expect another spike next year, although I would love one. I'm hoping that as we continue to see CorePac and other firms like Catworks get their experience out here and increase their bonding capacity to do runway work, that we see this number trend up, and then we're able to show the FAA that we can raise our goals on these contracts. So again, I'm happy. And when I'm happy, everyone's happy on my team because I love these numbers. Next slide, please. So our ACDBE program, another federal program, it's required for any airport who gets FAA grant dollars for runway improvements must have an ACDBE program in place for their airports. ACD firms must have an opportunity to operate either as a concessionaire or provide goods and services related to airport concession activity, such as food, janitorial, uniforms, things of that nature. Car rental concessions activity is tracked separately from in-terminal concessions activity. So we're required to have 2 different goals, 2 different programs. We have a food and retail goal, then we have a car rental goal, and then we have separate programs, and we report to the FAA how we're going to approach outreach and inclusion for each separately. For in-terminal concessions, we were able to achieve our goal was 20.48%. I know that's a really odd number, but the FAA loves for us to go to the second decimal point out there for these percentages. And we were able to get 23.7%. The goal was used analyzing what upcoming opportunities we had that we're going to go out to lease, what's our pool in the marketplace for ACDB firms to perform work. And our marketplace is Oregon and Washington, so we were able to look at the Seattle marketplace as well, and really kind of drive where our goal should be. And we had the concessions program was also part of our 2018 disparity study. And so that's how we ended up at the odd number of 20.48. But it's about 20% and kind of in alignment with our SBE programs. It feels good and it feels right when you do just kind of a touch point on that. We were able to get 23.7%. We have 22 ACDB locations in our airport and 17 million in gross revenue. So liking that. Car rental is a little different. Car rental, we've always struggled with getting participation. It's just the nature of car rental companies. You've got the big three that own all of them, even though you might see 6 or 7 brands in the marketplaces, they're all owned by 3. And so they're not small businesses. And in order to be a small business, you can't afford a fleet of vehicles in every airport. So the way we get participation on the car rental side is that we ask them to use goods and service providers who are ACDB certified. Typical providers are insurance companies when you are asked if you want that insurance, when you rent your vehicle, vehicle maintenance, uniform swag, and office equipment, things of that nature. And so our goal, again, driven off of our disparity studies, 1.85%. We ended up at 1.61. Fortunately, we fell short this year. Car rental participation is achieved when they're using these goods and services, but a lot of the car rental agencies during the pandemic took a big impact. We saw across the nation car rental companies selling off portions of their fleet. Folks weren't renting vehicles as much as passenger travel went down. So I'm not feeling too bad about the 1.61, especially when I'm talking to partners at other airlines that got zeros across the board. Additionally, we could have gotten above that 1.61 if a few of the vendors who were certified in other states would have gotten reciprocity certification in Oregon. Again, if they're not certified in Oregon or Washington, we can't count them. So there were a few examples of that. So I'm not feeling too bad about it. I don't like not missing my goal, but I think they did a pretty good job of getting there as best they could, given the marketplace. And that reflected about $1 million in revenue to suppliers for the car rental companies at PDX. Next slide. Let's see here. All right, and as you can see, here is a snapshot of our historical participation out at PDX. We tend to hover about the 25% range. This is a good indication that we might be able to raise this at some point, although we did just issue a new goal that raised us from, I believe it was 18% to 20.48, but we might be able to raise this in another year or so if we continue to trend up. As you can also see, we have a history of kind of missing and sometimes exceeding the car rental. It fluctuates in the marketplace. A lot of it depends on passenger travel or whether or not the car rental companies are replacing their fleets that year, things of that nature. A fleet turnover could create a lot of opportunity, which is what you're seeing in 2017. Next slide. Now I'm going to talk about my favorite program, the Mentor Protege program. It was established in 1995 to overcome barriers that was preventing minority and women-owned businesses from gaining port contracts. It's a 3-year program that uses a 3-prong approach by combining mentorship, education, and technical services to provide full wraparound support to small business owners to help them grow their businesses strategically. The program is administered in partnership with ODOT, who contributes $150,000 a year. We matched that to administer the program. We discovered by pooling our resources, we were able to support more firms than we would if we administered our own separate program. So the teamwork is working. So I'll just kind of go over the 3-prong approach in a little bit more detail. We have each protege is given 2 mentors, one with industry-specific knowledge that complements the small business owner's business type, and one with the financial knowledge. So this is generally those that know numbers and can help them make strategic decisions around business. Let's see here. The second piece is the business classes. So we have a core fundamentals business classes that we have once a month, and we talk about everything from finances to business 101 to HR administration, project management. And so the whole time they're getting their mentorship, they're also getting these business classes. And then finally, we have technical services. The port provides targeted technical services. Typical services include project management, bonding, software, and marketing. Our goal is to support businesses with targeted support and not use a one-size-fits-all approach. Not everybody's in the same point in the race. Everybody has different needs. We all don't see the same doctor and get the same medication. We're not going to do that with businesses either. So we really want to examine where are you at, make sure that they're getting the services that are targeted for them. So this approach has been very successful. And we're starting to track how much of this work is benefiting those firms that are coming back onto our projects after they graduate. So last year, 11.2 million in port contracts went to past and current proteges. This is one of our highest years yet. A lot of that could be attributed to TCOR. That team is taking a very targeted approach in reaching out to graduates of the program, not only for subcontracting opportunities, but for project-specific mentoring opportunities. So I'm really excited. Maybe next year I'll have a really good report out on where we're at with that. We're starting to ramp up with some of the project-specific mentoring specifically for TCOR, and I'm sure those stories are going to be amazing. But you're seeing the numbers trickle up. And I just want to point out that this is year 2 of the new cohort that was onboarded right at the beginning of the pandemic. It was a really rough time. So every one of these proteges saw some financial loss in year 1, and that was across the board. But the program allowed all of them to stay in business. And a lot of them attribute that if it wasn't for the program, they wouldn't have known what jobs to take or how to kind of pivot in this pandemic environment to stay afloat and to stay above board. And so I just really proud of that all 15 proteges stayed in business through this and didn't have to close doors. I mean, that was a huge win. And now we're starting to see the jobs come back for them. Next slide, please. So the Port's Workforce Training and Hiring Program is designed to increase the numbers of women and minorities in the construction trades through apprenticeship opportunities. Minority categories include Hispanic, Black, Asian, Native American, Pacific Islanders, and Native Hawaiian Islanders, Arab, and Middle Eastern. The program requires construction contracts 500,000 or more to provide 20% of the total labor hours to be performed by state registered apprentices. We also have diversity goals on our larger contracts requiring aspirational goals, I should say, 14% female and 25% minority hours. The diversity goals are aspirational and are stretch because they exceed the available pool of female and minority workers in the halls. However, in alignment with our regional agency partners, we have established stretch goals to encourage trade unions to intentionally outreach and recruit diverse and female apprentices when new training opportunities arise. In addition to this program, our team supports minority and female pre-apprentice programs to understand barriers to entry, provide funding to support the training of diverse participants, and to keep the line of communication open about what projects are coming down and make sure help them target recruitment of new apprentices to get them ready, willing, and able to come onto our job sites. In FY21, we recorded 1.4 million in total trade hours. 296,000 hours were performed by state registered apprentices, meeting our 20% goal. This represented $9.8 million in wages to apprentices from through our projects. I mean, that's an impact, $9.8 million in wages, family wages to those in our community. So that number, I love that number. As you can see, though, we did fall short of our diversity goals. We got 20% out of our stretch goal of 25% for minority, and only 2% of our stretch goal for 14% for female, which is, you know, the stretch goals will continue to stay there as we strive to increase that. As you can imagine, one barrier for women and minorities on job sites is not feeling welcome, and so we are continuing to implement programs that we believe will make it easier for female and minority workers to finish their apprenticeships while on port projects. In partnership with regional partners, we signed the Safe from Hate Job Site Culture Pledge, which provides a list of actions and strategies to help prevent and mitigate job site harassment. As a result, we have partnered with Oregon tradeswomen to implement an anti-harassment program called Rise Up. All workers who step onto a port job site will be required to attend anti-harassment training and will understand clear direction on how to prevent and report such behavior. Our goal is to have a zero tolerance policy for our projects for any harassment, hazing, or bullying, and have a safe and welcoming job site for all. Next slide. So, you know, last year the port enhanced its equity on focus on equity through a shared prosperity lens to use the power and position the port has in the community to elevate communities historically and negatively impacted by systematic policies, creating inequities within those communities. This work resulted in 4 distinct efforts the small business team will focus on for 22. One, we're going to explore the implementation of a target market program, which will identify low-dollar contracts the port can compete solely between certified small businesses. This will help smaller businesses learn port processes and take advantage of, in a smaller environment, of how to do work at the port with support through this program. So that's building that pipeline of businesses that can take on larger work down the line. We're partnering with Rise Up to implement an anti-harassment and bullying program, focused on ensuring construction work sites are safe for all workers. Again, that's going to be a big lift, but I believe it's going to be a huge game changer for increasing the diversity of those on our workforce. Number 3, we're going to increase focus on our compliance reviews and reporting to ensure project equity goals are attained. 4, we're going to collaborate with port departments to review small business participation on current contracts and identify future opportunities for small businesses and future construction projects and professional services projects. And then finally, we're going to expand our technical assistance support and training to small businesses. So we're launching, we've done technical assistance on our larger projects. We've done it through our Mentor Protege program, but now we're expanding that to say, we want to help out any small business that needs help when they land on a port project. And so we're going to be focusing on that for the next year. Next slide, please. And thank you for your time. As you reflect on this presentation, if there are any suggestions you have for improving our program, or if there are any ideas we should be looking at for improving this work, I am open to that, and I do appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Kimberly. I appreciate your energy and enthusiasm about this, and it feels like, obviously a precursor to lots of our shared prosperity work. So thank you for that, for setting goals that really push and working so hard to meet them. Commissioner Alexander.
Great. Madam President, thank you very much. And I join you in applauding the work and the efforts of Kimberly and her team and the organization. I mean, this is shared by all. I'm curious because there has been tremendous impetus and traction added to this work over the last several years. A couple of questions. One, have any of the organizations and small businesses, minority-owned businesses that you work with, outgrown that characterization as small business? I mean, have they moved up into the space that allows them to be directly competitive with primes and others, so that they are sort of charting their own path independently? I'm curious.
Yeah, that's a great question. And yes. We're starting to see the smaller businesses give a run for the money to the big business, and they're winning the bids at the port. And a few of them are graduates of the Mentor Protege program. It took a long run to get there, but we're starting to see minority-owned contracting companies who are not only competing but winning these contracts. And they're able to, the beauty of that is that they tend to hire subcontractors that are also from the community as well. And so we're, again, the pool and the community support of, like, I'm a small business and now I'm a large business as a prime. I'm going to continue to contract with other small businesses and mentor them on our projects. And we're starting to see that pathway, and it's a beautiful thing to see and witness after 20 years of doing this. And some of these businesses I've watched over 20 years get to this point. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, I said something that was just brilliant, but I forgot it. I had a follow-up. The other question is, I know that the threshold for measuring and tracking is bids of 500,000 or above, but is there any anecdotal line of sight as to whether this practice is embraced and followed within smaller contracts by some of the larger contractors? I've held the belief that the port can be very prescriptive in the requirements that we place on this business and this engagement. The true benefit is if these patterns become embedded within the operation of businesses. And there are a lot of, there's a lot of money moving in contracts under $500,000. Are we seeing some, and again, it's anecdotal, it's not our world to measure, but are we seeing where this is reflective of how people look to their business and their partnerships and the accountability that they have to work with some of these smaller vendors?
Yes, actually, we do track the under $500,000 as well, and you'll see that reflected with Dr. Nakana when he does his quarterly update by department. And so our team worked with Dr. Nakana to do that snapshot of by department of what are they spending, what could they have achieved based on what they actually achieved. And we found that by working with each group individually, we're able to create a better outcome. And we do have those numbers and we do track it. We're trending right at the 20% mark, which is right in alignment with what the disparity study said our availability was. But we do track that, and I can provide you the latest report on that if you would like.
Thank you.
Commissioner McDonald?
Kimberly, first, I want to congratulate you on your results. You anticipated every one of my questions. When I saw you so exceeding your goals year on year, I was wondering, when is she going to change the goal? So you proactively answered that. I wonder, are you seeing any unique challenges as we continue to work our way? You talked a little bit about this, but as we continue to work our way through the pandemic into perhaps an era where we may have an endemic, are there any special program design or attributes you're looking at to ensure you continue the progress that you've made? Because this is definitely a case study in cultural and business transformation.
It's a very interesting question, actually. So yes, so one trend that we're seeing across the board is that labor shortages, and this is not unique to any,
right.
Every business, large and small, is experiencing labor shortages. So what happens is if I'm a small business owner and I have a really good foreman or project manager that I depend on, they're being snatched up by these large companies that can offer them more money, sign-on bonuses, better benefits and retirement, and all of these things because of the gap in the market. So what we're seeing is that a lot of small businesses are having key personnel poached by larger businesses across the board. And so I think I heard an economist coin this, the Great Resignation. Is the job economy right now.
Yes.
And no one is feeling that more than small businesses. So what we've seen is in the marketplace are small businesses who are geared up to do work suddenly having to walk away from contracts or make a decision on, I'm going to have to go back out in the field. I haven't actually, operated machinery in 10 years, but now I'm going to have to operate this machinery to finish a project because, I don't have the manpower to do it. So we're starting to see that the biggest impact the Great Resignation is having are on small business owners. This is anywhere from concessions to contractors to architects, to engineers. It's across the board. And so what we're doing on our end is that I've been talking with recruitment aid services and staffing organizations, and trying to provide gateways and pathways for small businesses to work with actually professional recruiters to help find and locate potential folks to fill these gaps. It's a big lift, but one of the biggest things we saw in this first year of the pandemic and the reason why so many businesses had lost revenue was because they didn't have staff. They had to walk away from projects. They just simply could not perform it because they didn't have enough folks to run the project. I have one protege right now who is at her wit's end because she's doing the back office, the estimating, the bidding, and has been out on the constructions and been out on the site as well. And she's burning the candles at both ends. And she literally is in tears in these meetings, just saying, I need somebody just to do bookkeeping. I need an actual office worker to submit these things. So we're starting to see the strain of this across the board, and that's the uniqueness of it, and that our remedy is to work with the recruiters in some capacity, provide training or resources for folks to find folks to work specialize in construction field administration.
That's an excellent step, helping them connect with recruiters. Hopefully that can help because the labor shortage is definitely being felt globally. And you're right, across every industry. And I can see where particularly small businesses.
They just simply can't compete.
Thank you again.
No problem.
Thank you. Commissioner Nemi.
Thank you. Appreciate the report. I'm particularly just happy about the results on the Small Business Protege program. And that seems really exciting, and just, want to say, is there some way that this is a pretty incredible commission with a lot of experience. And so if there are ways that the commission could connect in to help support that program, I know I would be willing to do that. My guess is there are others who would as well.
I love that idea. Yes, thank you. I don't know how to do that, what that looks like just yet, but yes, I love that. And I'll have to noodle on that a little bit, figure out what that looks like. Yes.
Commissioner O'Halloran.
Thank you. And thank you for this really important work. And I think you've partially answered my question previously, but I wanted a nuance on Commissioner McDonald's question, which is, if we increase the threshold percentage requirement of contracting, are there enough contractors to meet that demand? And I want to make sure that we're not setting ourselves up for failure, that we try to increase the requirement and make it a requirement we can't meet because there aren't enough minority businesses to fill the increased percentage that we had.
That's a very good question. So typically, there's a two-prong approach to goal setting, whether it's a contract goal or an overall goal. The bases are the same. First, we look at the available pool in the marketplace to perform work, and then we compare that to past utilization. How have we typically performed? And the typical snapshot is about 5 years. We like to look at a 5-year trend and then compare those two numbers to make a determination on what the goal will actually be. So the 20% goal was based off of our disparity study analysis and the 5 years before that. But when we couple that with the new 5-year trend, then we're able to actually increase the goal to 25%, and it's a defensible one that's based on the science of math and a very complicated algebraic equation. So it is very driven by the data, and what the data represents is that the businesses that were analyzed at the time of the disparity study, it wasn't not just the pool of available firms in the marketplace, but the capacity. How much work could they do? How much bonding did they have? How much money did they have cash on hand to take on a larger project? So what the higher goal actually reflects is that although marginally the pool of available contractors has increased, but not 5%. But what it is that the pool of available firms have increased their capacity to a point that they can take on larger work. And we're seeing that by seeing that the minority and women-owned contractors are priming these large contracts. So we're seeing more and more prime contractors, which are the power positions, which means that they have the bonding capacity. They have the cash on hand to pay folks, because sometimes you don't get paid for 60 days out on a project. They have the equipment and things of that nature, which allows them to take on bigger work. So the goal is not just availability in the marketplace, but capacity. And so that's where the 25% is driven from.
Yeah, you're confident we could meet the higher threshold?
I am very confident we can meet it, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly and commissioners, for a great discussion and presentation. We'll move on to our next general discussion item, which will be introduced by Stan Waters.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. This general discussion item is our annual review of the Port's Transportation Improvement Plan, which is a 20-year look at our transportation needs. You see this every year, and each year we ask the Commission to hold a public hearing for the Port Transportation Improvement Plan, or what we call PTIP, and later to adopt the PTIP. This process is necessary to meet the regulatory prerequisites for seeking federal grant funding for port projects as identified in the plan. Transportation continues to be both a strategic advantage for this region and a potential vulnerability. We're a relatively small market, and good access to markets within and beyond our region is critical for our economy. The PTIP identifies projects on port facilities as well as projects on facilities owned by other agencies that can improve access to key markets. Projects are pursued depending on the priorities of the port and our partners, as well as the timing and fit of the different funding opportunities. Today, Louis Lem, Senior Transportation Planner, will provide an overview of this year's Port Transportation Improvement Plan for your review and comment, and then after that, a public hearing on the document will follow. So Louis, take it away.
Thank you very much, Stan, and good morning, commissioners and everyone. I'm delighted to have a chance to come back to the commission this year in relation to the Port Transportation Improvement Plan. We are doing the 2022 update public hearing, and this important document is part of what we use to guide the port's direction in transportation investment and pursuing federal and state grant planning. And I'm also just delighted to follow my colleague at the port, Kimberly Sutton, speaking about the small business program. One of the aspects of what we do with the PTIP is we do make the Port Transportation Improvement Plan available on the website for the public to view. And so that also gives an opportunity for potential consultants and contractors to view the port's potential projects that are upcoming. So next slide, please. The Port Transportation Improvement Plan, or PTIP, is the long-range plan for capital projects that have been determined to contribute to improved transportation access for port facilities and properties. This year's PTIP 2022 consists of more than 80 planned projects, and they cover a full range of types of projects, including aviation and marine capital projects, as well as surface transportation projects that would be both road and rail projects. There are also very specific types of projects included, such as projects that address bicycle and pedestrian needs, as well as ITS, which stands for Intelligent Transportation Systems projects. An example of that would be an electronic reader board providing real-time traffic information for motorists approaching the airport. Next slide, please. The transportation system improvement projects included in the PTIP are sourced or come from various port planning documents and studies. So these studies include facility plans, the port capital plan, various transportation studies, and our improvement plans associated with industrial property development. Once approved by the Commission, the port staff uses the PTIP to inform the grant management team and the project portfolio office about potential external funding opportunities and priorities. The port seeks external funding to pay for these PTIP projects from federal, state, regional, and local government sources. Next slide, please. Some of you might have been familiar with some recent congressional legislation that passed in 2021 at the last quarter of the year. That was called the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or the IIJA. This was passed by Congress on a bipartisan basis and signed by the President in 2021. The IIJA provides additional funding for discretionary competitive grant awards by the federal government. So there were two types of external funding made available through this legislation. There had already been existing discretionary grant programs, and the legislation provided additional funding for those programs, as well as Congress authorizing new programs, new discretionary grant programs that public agencies such as the port could compete for. As we're looking ahead in 2022, we are anticipating these notices of funding opportunities, or the announcements of potential grant opportunities. Some of them that we have our eye out for include these three noted on the slide. The US DOT has a program called RAISE, which stands for Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity. The United States Maritime Administration, also part of US DOT, has a program called the Port Infrastructure Development Program. So that's a grant program that's specific to port authorities, such as the Port of Portland. And thirdly, as an example, there's a new authorized airport terminals grant program that the FAA has been authorized by Congress to offer. Finally, an example of a state grant program that the Port of Portland has competed for in the past and is in the middle of a competition for is referred to as the State of Oregon Connect Oregon grant program. And that's a grant program that's specific to fund projects that are related to freight transportation. Next slide, please. So why do we do the PTIP document, and why do we do these projects? It's important for us to have a public visibility on the PTIP so that we can coordinate with other agencies and private entities within the transportation world and related to transportation facilities that provide access to the port. The PTIP also meets the public participation requirements to qualify these port projects for federal funding, including related to those external grant opportunities. Finally, as I noted at the onset, the public visibility allows members of the public, potential consultants, any other stakeholders to view the port's planned transportation priorities for the future. Next slide, please. So a little bit on the changes from the previous PTIP from last year, as well as a couple of examples of what's included in the PTIP. As I noted last year when I came to the commission, the PTIP does conform with the metropolitan region's most recently approved Regional Transportation Plan, or RTP. That plan was approved in 2018, and so our document does conform with that plan for the region. We've also included an updated information related to current marine terminal projects that are potential candidates for external grant applications. As you all know, there's been a lot of interest in potential improvements in infrastructure nationwide related to supply chain and goods movement. So we've taken a note to provide more information related to those projects. The PTIP document also reflects updated information and outcomes from the General Fund Next planning process. And a couple of examples of projects that are in the PTIP, just to make it more concrete and real for you. A number of the component projects of the ongoing PDX Next project, PDX Next program, are in the PTIP. The Resilient Runway project, which is a major pavement improvement related to the runway, is in the PTIP, as well as an important project that is planned at 82nd and Airport Way, which provides access to the airport. That's also in the PTIP. And finally, as an example, we have an intersection it's actually two intersections at Columbia, Alderwood, and Cully, and that's a significant access location for the airport and for some of our goods movement and freight facilities. Next slide, please. So at this time, we would like to request that the Commission Chair open the public hearing for public comment, and the public comment period is open for the required 45 days. As I noted, the PTIP document is available on the website and has been publicly noticed so that the public has an opportunity to comment if they wish to do so. After the closing of the public comment period, we at the port will make any changes to the draft document in order to incorporate any public comments received. And then finally, the Commission will see the final PTIP plan for 2022. We have that on the agenda for March of 2022 to be brought back for your consideration and approval. Following Commission approval, the PTIP document will then be submitted to relevant regional, state, and federal transportation planning agencies in order for these projects to be eligible for potential future funding. Thank you very much for your interest and your time.
Thank you very much. I'm going to pause and ask for questions or comments before we open the public meeting, and I see Commissioner Nemi.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you for the report on this. It is exciting to have these infrastructure dollars available to us. I would like to know, I know in previous commission meetings we've discussed the large number of commuters that come to PDX in particular to work, and the impact that can have on emissions and on climate and on traffic. And I recently heard of some groundbreaking work that was done at LAX to give free transit passes, to create some sort of micro transportation for workers who might live in neighboring communities. And so I would be interested in hearing when we get a report back and which ways that we feel like we can also, look at what are some of the other options to make sure that employees commuting to PDX have affordable options for public transportation, and what else might be available as part of this plan.
Thank you, Commissioner Nemi, and we would certainly be happy to provide more information. And I would just note at this time that there is an updated airport master plan that is in the works. And my understanding is that would consider all the multimodal transportation range of options for employees and commuters coming to the airport.
Thank you. Commissioner Alexander.
Good. Thank you, Madam President. I also want to sort of piggyback on Commissioner Nemi's comments, and I am fully supportive of us looking at that. Louis, the other item that I think that I would just want to make sure that we sort of put on the list of considerations as we move forward in talking about the RAISE program, the federal infusion of dollars. One of the differences between that initial funding and the current program is the addition of additional infrastructure dollars to address historical disruptions to communities as a result of federal transportation programs. And there's been a pool of dollars set aside to either mitigate some of that or in some instances to rectify what have been historical disinvestments within communities over decades. Lots of focus here in Oregon, particularly in terms of I-5 and making sure that there's adequate movement of freight and goods through the city, but also looking at whether there is a restorative justice element to that work and to that planning. And I would just say, as the port continues its significant and I think authentic work within shared prosperity, that you think about how we weigh in on advancing that consideration as well. And again, I think the particular emphasis is on developing a shared set of platform strategies and belief with ODOT, because in order to be eligible for those dollars, there's got to be an alignment between community, regional government, city government, and state transportation planning. So I think while it's not core to who we are, it is certainly aligned with what we aspire to be in terms of a participant in expanding equity and these kind of considerations across the state. So, I mean, it's a long comment, but I think that there's a set of opportunities here that are different, that have been added to over the last several years, and hopefully we can take advantage of that as well and sort of weigh in as appropriate.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Alexander, and we very much appreciate your highlighting that information. What you indicated, we are tracking and following that. There have been new developments from the federal legislation, and we continue to work with our public agency partners in the region and in the state, not just speaking about the port projects, but we also do weigh in on regional projects as a public agency that's affected by them. So we very much appreciate your highlighting that for us, and we'll go forward with that in mind.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other raised hands, I will now open a public hearing with respect to the PTIP. for those who wish to provide comments on this port's transportation improvement plan. No requests for comments or comments were received, so I'll close the public hearing. No action is required at this time. The Port Transportation Improvement Plan will be back before the Commission for action next month. So thank you very much. And we'll move on to our consent item agenda. Ask if any commissioner would like a presentation on the consent item. I'll read the title. Procurement Contract, Oshkosh Equipment Snowblower, Portland International Airport. Materials were provided ahead of the meeting. Does anyone need a presentation? Okay, seeing none, I'll call for a motion and second for approval of the consent item.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, I'll ask Pam to lead us through the vote, please.
Yes, and I'll note for the record that Commissioner Sumput is away until 11. Commissioner Alexander?
Aye.
Kupro-Comas?
Aye.
Lamb?
Aye.
Levy?
Aye.
McDonald?
Aye.
Nemi?
Aye.
O'Halloran?
Aye.
And Strader.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pam. I'll call in Vince Granato for the next agenda item.
Good morning, commissioners. And just before I get into our item here, I just do have to give a shout out to Kimberly as well. You know, we're heavy into the project, and her relationships and her partnership is just, it takes all of us to make this thing work. And she's just such a great job, and just really want to thank her for all that she does in helping us accomplish what we do. So she's really terrific. This morning, I'm here with George, and we're going to ask for a relatively small contract by Terminal Core standards for some mechanical items that we need in advance of getting to our guaranteed maximum price with our construction partner, which is Hoffman Skanska joint venture. He's going to get George to go walk you through the detail, but just a little heads up here. So we've really accomplished a lot of work up to this point. It's hard to believe we're really not very far away from having the first part of the roof structure start to move. Only probably 5 or 6 months before that begins. And but while the construction is happening, we're really focused on getting to that guaranteed maximum price with the Hoffman Skanska team, and that is proving to be pretty challenging right now in this environment. We're seeing cost escalations in all the commodities, supply chain disruptions, COVID impacts, labor, all that good stuff, right? Which you all have seen throughout the industries, and sure impacting your work as well. So we are trying to figure out what our number ought to be, and then what contingency levels are appropriate at this point in time. But we're working on that with the partner, and we expect to be back to you probably sometime in April. But the reality is, it's likely that our budget will be above the $1.65 billion that was approved by the airlines. Now, how much that is, we're not exactly sure yet. On the positive side, we've contracted about 2/3 of the work so far. Our design is complete, and pretty soon, we'll be done with the demolition and really coming out of the ground. So some of the risk goes down, but the pricing, labor costs, labor availability, the COVID impacts are just really presenting a challenge for us right now. So we're trying to get to that GMP as quickly as we can, but still trying to manage the overall risk of the project. So we'll be back to you in the next couple of months here and keeping you posted on our progress. So I'll stop there and let George walk you through the details of this project, and then certainly we're around for any other questions that you might have for us. George.
Thanks, Vince. Good morning, commissioners. Next slide, please. So as Vince mentioned, we're here to ask approval on about a $30 million contract amendment with the Hoffman Skanska JV for early procurement of mechanical and electrical equipment and some general conditions extensions until the establishment of the GMP. Next slide. It's actually been a while since we've been back to commission on the T-Corps project. I think the last time we were here was last June. So I want to go through some of the accomplishments in 21, what we're looking forward to happening in 22, and then a series of pictures will bring you up to speed kind of what's been going on. 21 was a big year for us. We began the erection of the glulam beams in the roof in the prefabrication yard. We closed the Oregon market. With the opening of the Packer project and the RCC, we were able to move everybody out of the terminal building, really out of the way of the construction. We completed the design, substantially complete, in September, and then the bypasses were up and running. And at the end of it, Concourse B was operational. Next slide. 22 is really going to be all about establishing a GMP, and then it's going to be all about the roof. So we've got some bids out on some of the major portions of design package F, which is our completion of design. We'll be beginning the structural demo of the building. As Curtis mentioned earlier, it'll be pretty noisy starting in March. It says May here. We're hoping to bring that GMP back to April to commission. And then by June, the structural demo is complete and we'll start erecting the roof, with the roof columns coming in June, and the very end of June or early July installing the roof modules, and it's intended to be complete by the end of the year. Next slide. Last year, we relocated the concourse connector to the north and south of the terminal building to allow the passengers to bypass construction activity in a safe manner. If you've been out the airport flying and you want to connect from either the concourse D to E or B to C, you'll go out in the bypass. Here's a couple of pictures of them up and running right now. Next slide. There's been a lot of work in the alleyway between concourses C and D. If you remember, probably the last time we showed, we had some pretty significant holes in the ground to do the fuel system underneath the concourses. In November, this is a picture of some of the work that's ongoing on there. It was a lot of the piles. There were over, I think it was 650 vibratory piles that were installed. Those are all complete. The sanitary waste system, the lift station, it was right outside of the building, has now been moved further out. All that's been completed. Next slide. And then if you looked at the space, next slide, please. Okay. There we go. Thank you. So if you look at the space out there, just last month, there's all the piles are done. It's a lot of the substructure work for preparing the columns for the new building. A lot of the substructure electrical, all of that's being completed right now. So come the March timeframe, when we start the building structural demo, all this work will be pretty well done. There'll be a crane pad put in to enable the building to be demolished, and then eventually crane pad for the roof installation. Next slide. So a lot of the work activity right now is around upgrading the structural slab, the old 1956 building. If you remember, the building is stitched together from a series of projects that have occurred since the original construction. One of the problems that came up is we removed the topping slab on the old 1956 building. There was a series of penetrations that were no longer properly supported, which would then have the opportunity, potential to fall down onto the baggage handling system area. So we spent about 4 months' time really improving the safety of this space. We also discovered a lot of asbestos in the slab that we had no idea was there. So the net result of this was a significant impact to the project schedule. Next slide. So right now that slab, as it was removed and supported, it's now, there's a new popping slab put in. You can see all the rebar here on this drawing that will enable the existing slab and the existing building to really strengthen and then be tied together. Next slide. We've now poured, that section was set up into 4 different sections. As of today, we poured the 3rd section of topping slab back. If you look in the right-hand picture, when that slab is complete and cured, We then waterproof the floor because that becomes the roof of the building, and everything above that floor gets demolished, and that demolition will start in the March timeframe. Next slide. The other big thing that's really been happening is the roof construction. So here's an overhead vision of the center section of the roof being fabricated over by the fire station in November. Next slide. And if you look at it just in December, you can see the kind of the wing sections, which will go over the ends, kind of where the concourses are, and become the new concession nodes and the top of the structure being fabricated. With the delay by the seismic upgrade, the roof's actually gotten ahead of where we would have needed it, so it's really been a good relief for the project team. Next slide. A couple of images of the lattice installation. This is the kind of the first area was complete. Above the lattice and the roof decking is all the sound insulation, the fire sprinklers, the electrical. In this image, you can see some of the electrical wiring hanging out. Then in future, we'll have some componentry as well as some lights installed. Next slide. And then as you look kind of towards, this would be towards the east, looking kind of towards where the ticket lobby will be. There's some skylights in this area. Next slide. And then looking back with the lattice work as it's complete, kind of this area as it's complete, just set ready for lights. And then starting in the June timeframe, we start kind of disassembling this section to bring it over and put it over top of the terminal building. Next slide. From a schedule perspective, this is, I think, the 23rd presentation to Commission for action items on the project. We anticipate being back for the GMP and then a couple of design contracts, commissioning, and design construction administration going forward. With design complete, we'll be establishing the final GMP. We'll bring back hopefully an April timeframe for you. Right now, big picture in the schedule, we're anticipating the western expansion and the ticket lobby being operational April of 24, and then the north and south nodes in the fall of 25. Next slide. As Vince mentioned, the cost is increasing. This is the current budget. The cost is increasing. We do not think the current budget will be adequate. There's this exposure out there with some pretty unprecedented escalation. We still have about $450 million to bid, and we've been seeing from a number of our CMGC firms, both the Hoffman-Skansky team as well as others, anywhere from 16 to 20% construction escalation year over year. There's also a lot of market uncertainty as you come out of COVID, market conditions with delivery, labor cost escalation, and then the schedule impacts that I mentioned earlier, primarily associated with the seismic upgrade. All of those are causing stress to the project budget. We're working with the Hoffman-Skansky JV and the trade partners to look at opportunities to reduce cost and also how we can provide more certainty to the budget quickly. We've been communicating with the airlines on the pricing and their request to us to quickly establish a GMP. From a construction small business participation, we're running a little below that 20%, but this next package, design package F, which is about $450 million, is anticipated to be about 21% small business participation. Next slide. Since it's been a while since I've been to Commission, we've got this slide. It really shows the contracts with the JV. We started with pre-construction in May of 2018. We then brought some other projects that were cost-effectively installed with T-Core, passenger boarding bridges and terminal relamp. Concourse B was about $94 million in 2019. And then we've had a pretty much a series of T-Core construction work, from building a logistics center for the roof fabrication, to installing the site utilities and the piling subcontractors in March of 2020. Then kind of the biggies in August of 20 was the contract for the structure and the building envelope, and then the end of 20, early 21 was demolition, early MEP, and logistics. So the net we've committed at this point is about $870 million to the Hoffman-Skanska JV. Next slide. We anticipate being back for the GMP. Right now it's budgeted $450 million, but we think that will go up in the April timeframe. We might be back later for the automated security lanes, although I think that may be a port procurement rather than under the JV. Either way, Commission will still see that contract amendment. Next slide. Contracted dates about $870 million. This amendment is for early MEP, mechanical and electrical procurements prior to establishment of the GMP. We're actually seeing some significant market impacts. The HVAC units we're pre-purchasing with this amendment are up to a 52-week lead time after we approve the drawings. So we needed to get this contract amendment prior to establishment of GMP in a few months. With this approval, overall contract amendment will be, our overall contract value will be about $900 million. Next slide. Staff recommends approval of the executive director recommendations. And are there any questions?
Thanks, George, and thank you for highlighting the cost increases that you're seeing. Two questions on that one. Well, I guess three questions. How are the airlines reacting to that? How does that interplay with the contingency on the project? And are we looking long range? I mean, I know I'm hopeful, and maybe naively so, that with a phasing out of Omicron, that maybe things will improve. Are we looking long range and seeing that play out in the market, or not really?
So I'll start with the last one first. What we're trying to do with the reflection, our challenge right now is we've committed about $1.1 billion already, and we really can't delay the project without significant risk on schedule. And we're spending about $6 million a month on schedule. So what we're trying to do to reflect that there could be, whether it's Omicron or just market conditions changing, we're only bidding what we have to bid. So anything we can delay to allow the market hopefully to steady out or come back, we're delaying. So even though we're establishing a GMP, the plan is there will still be $150 million that's not going to be bid until later in the year or even later. Forgot the second one. I should have went in order.
Well, let's see what the contingency and the airlines.
Yeah. So yeah, what we're also doing is we've done a pretty dramatic, or not dramatic, rigorous analysis of the contingency, and we're looking at, as we establish a GMP, only establishing the amount of contingency needed for the work ongoing forward. So we think the contingency will go down. It'll probably be about 10% of the work ongoing, which will probably be about $80–90 million when we establish the GMP. So we've been using the contingency as we've worked, because there has been a significant amount of COVID and other impacts to the project going forward. But one of the things is we're building the same scope that we committed to. There really hasn't been any scope increases. We think the team is working really well. There hasn't been a performance issue with whether it's design team or the JV. I think these are just conditions outside of our control in a lot of cases. And Vince, do you want to address the airlines?
Yeah, I mean, the airlines, obviously nobody likes to see the number go up, but they're seeing this across their system. So it's not a surprise at all, right? Whether it's San Diego, certainly LaGuardia, everybody who's going through this, and Seattle as well. So they were expecting it. Again, their direction to us and guidance, I would say, was let's try and get the number settled down as quickly as possible, because they're not feeling like it's going to get better. So the sooner you can get to a number, the better off that you're going to be. That's basically their guidance.
Thank you both. Commissioner Alexander.
Yes, George, as always, we appreciate just the thoughtful detail that comes into talking about this big work. You know, as you talk about some of the impacts of COVID on the joint venture Hoffman-Skanser and the tension that creates with getting to a GMP, is there also concerns around how this is impacting the smaller, excuse me, the smaller business partners? When you begin to look at this kind of long path forward to completion of the project, their ability to commit is based on the world that they occupy today, which may be very different than the world they occupy a year from now or 2 years from now. Are there any things that have been done or can be done to sort of allow them to navigate forward in a way that gives us greater confidence and them some greater control?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So one of the key things we're looking at now is we're out bidding, as we talked about, $450 million worth of work. So that will, if you allocate our small business, that's about $90 million worth of work we're anticipating. And we recognize that that's a significant lift for a smaller business to commit to work, some of which won't be done for 3 or 4 years. So we're looking at ways that how do we reduce the risk and the exposure for the small business. And one of the areas we're looked at is materials procurement and storage. So as we award it, we're evaluating, is there an opportunity for the smaller business to procure the material now, and we will store it for them at, for example, Delta Cargo, the old post office facility. So the JV is working with us and the smaller businesses to how do we define what things we can do to support them from a costing perspective, and how do we really reduce their risk.
Great. Thank you.
You know, and we've also tried to cut it up into smaller packages too.
Yes, thank you, Vince.
To make it more attractive. If it gets too big, right, the smaller businesses, and especially too far out there. So we've tried to slice it into smaller pieces too, to make it more manageable.
Yeah, the other thing too, and I commented, we've pushed some work out. So we're going to bid, or the JV will be bidding towards the summer, really the architectural finishes of the building. And then they won't bid the architectural finishes of the nodes until 23, because that work isn't going to occur until midway through 24. So we're trying to kind of push the work out from a bidding perspective, so it's not too far in the future that somebody's committing for work that won't be occurring for 3 years.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll call for a motion and second to approve the executive director's recommendation.
So moved.
I second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All right, Pam?
Commissioners Alexander,
Aye.
Kupro-Comas,
Aye.
Lamb,
Aye.
Levy,
Aye.
McDonald,
Aye.
Nemi,
Aye.
O'Halloran,
Aye.
and Strader.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next agenda item will be presented by Steve Nagy.
Thank you, Commissioners. Good morning. I'm here to request approval to award a public improvement contract for Taxiway T rehabilitation here at PDX between exits B4 and B5. This project will rehabilitate Taxiway T pavement that provides access from Concourse C gates for aircraft to approach and use the south runway here at PDX. The pavement was last rehabilitated in 2008, and a geotechnical investigation that we completed in 2020 determined that a rehab was needed to provide a 20-year pavement life for this area. Chris Edwards, the engineering project manager, is here to present the recommendation to award the contract.
Thank you, Steve, and good morning. First slide. Next slide, please. Today, I'm requesting approval to award a construction contract to Lakeside Industries for the Taxiway T Rehabilitation, exit B4 to B5 in the amount of a little over $1 million. Next slide. This shows the overall project location, which is just south of the PDX terminal. What it entails is a 3 and 6-inch mill and pave back and new light cans. Very straightforward project. Next slide. This shows the overall project schedule. The item bolded on your left is the action item before you today, but this project will be completed this year. Next slide. This shows the overall budget and funding. Again, that contract before you is on the top line. Our personal services for the design, port staff contracted services. This covers such thing as a project management, inspection, testing, corporate overhead, those items. Our contingency is 11%, which is appropriate given the complexity of the job. It is funded by the FAA as well as the Airline Cost Center. And our DBE goal for the job was 11%, and our contractor had a proposal of a little over that at 11.16%. Next slide. Staff requests approval of the Executive Director's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation of materials. Very straightforward. Do we have any questions on this item? Okay, seeing none, I will call for a motion and second to approve the Executive Director's recommendation.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion on this item? Okay, Pam, if you could lead us through the vote.
Yes, Commissioners Alexander,
Aye.
Kupro-Comas,
Aye.
Lamb,
Aye.
Levy, Commissioner Levy, McDonald,
Aye.
Nemi,
Aye.
O'Halloran,
Aye.
and Strader.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. Our final agenda item will also be introduced by Mr. Nagy.
Thank you again. This agenda item is to approve the award of a personal service contract for the final design services to Century West Engineering for the runway 13 right, 31 left runway safety area improvements project at the Hillsborough Airport. This project continues the port's work to address a wildlife attractant hazard that's been created by a wetland and a waterway that moves through the north end of the Hillsborough runway 13 right safety area. This will ultimately remove the wetland and maintain and improve the drainage around and through the site. An environmental assessment for this project was approved in August 2021, and this contract now will allow the project team to produce the bid documents for eventual construction of the improvements of this project in 2023. And Eric Forsyth, the engineering project manager, is here to present the recommendations to award the personal services contract.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Next slide, please. Morning, everyone. Today I'm here to request approval to award a personal services contract to Century West Engineering for the project that Steve was talking about in the amount of a little under $800,000. Next slide, please. As shown, the project scope on your screen was detailed out by our detailed environmental assessment work done for the years leading up to last summer, which the environmental assessment was approved by FAA through a finding of no significant impact. Now we have to turn this scope into reality. Next slide, please. So here we are for Century West's specific work scope elements involving project management, a little bit more geotechnical and pavement engineering, primarily design and preparation of construction documents leading us to a bid for construction work, which we'll see later this year, and bidding and environmental support. Next slide, please.
Here's Eric, I hate to interrupt you, but my slides are not advancing.
Okay.
I am still looking at commission action slide.
Okay. I see schedule.
I see schedule as well.
Okay. Maybe I can just slow down and wait for the slides to catch up. Is anyone else having problems?
No.
I see schedule as well.
Yeah, I don't see schedule. I see commission action.
Okay.
Let me do a quick.
I'll just go ahead and pause for a sec.
I'll give him a second. I say let's go ahead and he will catch up with us, I'm sure.
Okay, sure. Yeah, schedule for the overall project is shown here. I wanted to highlight all the work that the port team did through the environmental assessment process to fulfill the requirements of NEPA. Now we just have to turn that action into reality through final design and construction actions. So I've detailed out further commission action, our design phase, and then the upcoming construction phase for 2023. Commissioner Alexander, are you able to see the slides now?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much.
All right, good. Okay, great. Next slide, please. So budget and funding is as shown. We have our upcoming public improvement contract coming up. This particular action is for personal services. As stated earlier, for a little bit less than $800,000. We also have some pre-purchase items that we intend on purchasing for airfield lighting equipment and signs, plus port and contracted services, plus contingency, which is running at about 24% of project cost, which is appropriate given the risk and stage of the project that we're in right now. Funding for the project is 30% out of the Port Cost Center, but the primary funding source will be through a future FAA AIP grant that we're planning for to be issued first part of next year once bids are received. Also, too, to follow up on Kimberly's earlier presentation, our project goal for Century West's contracting methods are 11%, and Century West proposed 12% DBE participation level, which is fantastic. Next slide, please. Staff requests approval of the executive director's recommendations, and I can answer any questions that anyone might have.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, seeing none. Thank you again for the presentation. I will call for a motion and second to approve the executive director's recommendation.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, Pam, would you lead us through the vote, please?
Commissioners Alexander,
Aye.
Kuprokomis,
Aye.
Lamb,
Aye.
Levy,
Aye.
McDonald,
Aye.
Nemi,
Aye.
O'Halloran,
Aye.
and Strader.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. That concludes our business. I will adjourn the meeting at this point. I'll see you guys next month. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
Madam President.
Be safe.
Thank you.